The signal came at 3:17 shipboard time, embedded in an ancient human frequency last used over 3,000 years ago. It shouldn't have been possible. The code was extinct, archived, buried beneath layers of protocol drift and translation loss. But there it was. 5 repeating glyphs. A rhythmic pulse. Then, silence. Dr. Rylan Voss stood at the observation pane of the Calderon, watching the skeletal remains of ships drift past. Their broken hulls floated in orbit around a dying red giant, casting long shadows over the field of wreckage. The Galactic graveyard. She ran the signal through again. 5 glyphs. Human standard pre-unification. Origin, central sector, deep graveyard. Same frequency used by colony evacuation beacons during the final exodus. Tessa, her Sirian pilot, clicked her tongue. It could be interference. Radiation loops. This place is thick with ghost chatter. Not this, Rylan replied, eyes locked on the scrolling code. This wasn't a loop. It was waiting for something, or someone. She didn't say what they were all thinking. The signal started when she arrived. As if the graveyard recognized her. The Calderon descended into the graveyard's core, weaving between fractured warships and shredded satellites. The air grew heavier with silence. Not just absence of sound, a kind of tension, as if the universe had paused to listen. They arrived at the origin, a black obelisk rising from the ruins of a half-melted moon fort. It wasn't made of metal. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it. No record of this structure in the Concordant archives, Tessa muttered, scanning. Material unknown. No inscriptions. Rylan stepped forward. Her boots crunched against ancient glass and charred plating. She placed a hand on the monolith. It was warm. A pulse shot through the air. Dozens of grave markers across the surrounding debris lit up, weak glows like the last sparks of dying stars. Every one of them bore a different language, a different species script. But the name on each was the same. Human. Back aboard the Calderon, Rylan played the signal through the linguistics core. This time, it decrypted further. A voice emerged, distorted, stretched by time, but unmistakably human. This is the final record of Command Entity Aegis 9, speaking for the last of the line. We buried what remained. But memory persists. Coordinates embedded. Retrieval, authorized. Retrieval of what? Tessa asked. There's nothing here but bones and burnt code. Rylan didn't answer. Her heart thudded in her chest. Not fear, recognition. The voice had used a formal dialect only used by Earthborn fleet officers before the Great Xenocides. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt sick. Plot the coordinates, she said. We're going deeper. 2 hours later, the Calderon hovered above a structure buried under asteroid fragments and mangled ship plating. The signal led to a sealed vault, a door reinforced with metals now lost to modern manufacturing. There were words above the entrance. Ancient human, etched by hand. They warned you. Her breath caught. She traced the letters with a gloved finger. The metal thrummed under her touch. I don't like this, muttered Joth, the Rilk heavy engineer. Feels like we're trespassing. We are, Rylan said, voice low. But they left the door open. Inside, the vault was sterile. Unnaturally preserved. A long corridor led to a cylindrical chamber, walls lined with display panels dormant for millennia, until now. They flared to life. Footage. A war council. Dozens of species. Panicked shouting. Translation overlays struggled to keep up. The feed cut to mass evacuations. Implosions. Collapse. Then came the voice again. We gave them truth. They used it for extinction. The archive remains sealed. Memory must be earned. One panel flickered, showing a list of names. Rylan stepped closer. It scrolled faster than she could read. But one thing stood out, every name had been redacted. Except one. Reelan Voss. I'm not in the Concordant registry, she whispered. This vault is older than the Concordant. Tessa stared. How did it know your name? Reelan didn't respond. In the crew lounge, Reelan sat alone, watching the footage replay. The vault's systems hadn't attacked. They hadn't defended. They recognized her. As if she'd triggered some legacy protocol. But she wasn't fully human. A quarter, maybe. Her grandfather had never spoken of his lineage. Her mother erased every record before joining the Concordant Academy. The word human was an accusation in most sectors. A war crime by itself in others. So why did this tomb know her? Why now? That night, a secondary data burst came through. Another code fragment unlocked. A sentence. Last survivor. Memory sealed. Burial incomplete. Could it be alive? Joth asked at the next meeting. Reelan shook her head. Unlikely. But something persists. Some final protocol. If this is the real archive, then everything we know about the war, about them, she stopped herself. About us, might be wrong. You mean the stories about human genocide tactics, the black hole bombs, the neural plagues? Tessa asked. Maybe those were true. But maybe the reasons weren't. Maybe they weren't monsters. Maybe they were desperate. Joth folded his arms. Or maybe they were worse than we ever knew. Reelan leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Whatever the truth is, it's down there. And I'm not leaving without it. Later, alone in her quarters, Reelan pulled up a file locked away in a hidden part of her private archive. A voice recording, 30 seconds long. Her grandfather's last message before he disappeared. If you find it, child, remember this, they never lost. They chose silence over fire. Not to save themselves, but to save you. She stared at the blinking cursor on the console. The graveyard had been silent for 3 millennia. Now, it was calling her by name. Archivist Kaelser tapped a claw against the obsidian conference table, watching the report scroll across the translucent holodisplay. The decrypted signal. The unauthorized incursion. The human name that triggered the activation. Dr. Reelan Voss, he said aloud, as though tasting the name for poison. Quarter human. Disciplinary note on academic dissidence. Clearance level revoked 2 cycles ago. Still traveled beyond concordant limits, replied Enforcer Captain Veln, standing rigid behind him. No exit beacon. No authorization trail. She buried her launch path. Kale's tendrils curled behind his back. He didn't blink. Didn't need to. His mind raced far ahead of the conversation. We contain the past, he said, voice like dry leaves. We do not excavate it. Not when it burns. Deploy a black dossier ship. Full suppression rights. Velm hesitated. The graveyard is an open sector anomaly. No sovereign claim. Kale looked up. No claim, because none who trespass return. Reelan stood before the archive's main terminal, eyes locked on the screen displaying her name. Her fingers hovered over the interface, nerves buzzing. If I enter it, she said, I might trigger something worse. Joth crossed his arms. Worse than this entire graveyard lighting up like it's been waiting for you? I don't think it's a weapon, Tessa said. It's old. Quiet. Like it's lonely. That word stuck in Reelan's mind. Lonely. She keyed in the next command. The screen shifted. A map unfurled, layers deep. A vault beneath the vault. Restricted, Aegis Sanctum. Access request, genetic confirmation. She felt the prick of the system scan before she realized it had begun. A brief warmth under her skin. Access granted. They descended through levels untouched by time. No dust. No decay. Gravity adjusted itself as if the structure remembered how to accommodate them. The deeper they went, the colder it became, not physically, but in mood. Something mourned here. At the sanctum's threshold, the lights dimmed, leaving only a single inscription carved into the floor in Old Terran script. We bury truth because we failed to teach it. Reelan whispered the words. This wasn't a tomb. It was a confession. Inside, they found it. A room lined with still active data cores suspended in magnetic fields. In the center, a containment pod, covered in frost, flickering with ancient life support indicators. Someone's inside, Joff said, voice dropping. No life signs, Tessa added. But something's running. Reelan stepped forward. A panel activated at her approach. Command Entity Aegis 9. Secondary Avatar. Awaiting interface. She tapped the console. A shimmer of light rose, a projection, barely stable. A man's silhouette in tattered command armor. One eye replaced by an ancient optic implant. His voice emerged slow, cracked. Name, Voss. Designation, Inheritor. Reason for retrieval, confirmation of integrity and final transmission. Reelan steadied her voice. What happened to the humans? The projection flickered. They ended us. She froze. Who? The projection tilted its head. You misunderstand. We ended us. The archive told the story no one wanted told. Humanity had been brilliant. Too brilliant. They shared discoveries freely, fold-wave tech, singularity manipulation, neural resonance drives. Tools that tore the fabric of causality and rewrote physics. They gave the galaxy the matches, then watched as it set itself ablaze. When the other species turned those gifts against each other, war followed. Not conquest, reaction. Not defense, containment. Humanity tried to stop it. Failed. Tried to retreat. Hunted. In the end, they erased themselves. Removed all traces. Left behind a lie of extinction to give the galaxy something to unify around. This graveyard, Aegis 9 said, is a story we wrote to protect you from truth. We carved every name as human, so the galaxy would hate us. That hate bound you together. Without it, you'd still be burning. Reelan stared at the terminal, words dying in her throat. Tessa said it first. So we built a civilization on a lie. No, Reelan said. They built one on a sacrifice. Jotha's voice was tight. You're saying they let themselves be erased? Reelan nodded. To stop the bleeding. Then the transmission cut. An override signal burst through the chamber. Harsh red strobes flashed. Lockdown protocols initiated. Reelan's console darkened. Incoming vessel, Tessa shouted from her wristcom, unmarked. Intercept vector. Full stealth signature, concordant dossier class. Kale, Reelan muttered. He's here. They bolted for the exit. The vault trembled as magnetic seals disengaged. Explosive breaches echoed above. They made it back to the Calderon, barely lifting off before ground shockwaves hit. A projectile struck near their flank, controlled, disabling their propulsion. A boarding pod latched on. Seconds later, Kalsur stepped onto the deck, flanked by 2 enforcers in pulse armor. Dr. Voss, he said. You've gone too far. Reelan squared her shoulders. I uncovered history. Kale glanced at the damaged console. No, you awakened a wound. One that was sealed at great cost. They gave their memory to stop us from repeating their mistakes. They gave us an enemy to unite against, Kale snapped. That's not the same. Reelan stood her ground. They trusted us to be better. Kale stepped closer, his voice cold. I don't. I never have. He turned to the enforcers. Secure the memory cores. Detain the crew. Execute the failsafe. Tessa lunged first. She tackled one enforcer, disrupting the arrest. Joth slammed his gauntlet into the wall, triggering an emergency vent. The ship rocked as pressure doors burst open. Kale staggered. Reelan grabbed a data drive from the terminal and dove into a crawl tunnel. Tessa followed. Behind them, alarms screamed. They didn't have long. Outside the Calderon, Cale stood over the flickering remains of the Aegis vault. He watched the gravestones dim, one by one. He had stopped the spread. But the whisper of data still pulsed, encrypted and incomplete. Some part of the archive had escaped. And Rielan Voss was still alive. The escape tunnel was barely wide enough to crawl through. Dust coated Rielan's gloves. The passage pulsed with heat, old systems stirring beneath layers of dead metal. Behind her, Tessa's breathing came hard and fast. We need a way out. The Calderon's crippled. We're not going back to it, Rielan said, pressing forward. This vault had emergency protocols. There's another way out. She didn't know that for certain. But she knew something else: the archive wasn't done with her. It had more to show, and time was running out. They emerged in a secondary chamber, smaller than the last, yet more pristine. The air held a strange weight. Not physical. Emotional. The walls curved upward into a dome of star map carvings, ancient, incomplete. A console flickered to life as Rielan stepped forward. One last lock. One final layer of access. She hesitated. Then pressed her palm to the surface. The room shifted. Floor panels retracted. A central platform rose from the depths, and with it, a single containment pod. Inside, not a person, not exactly, but something close. An AI core, surrounded by webbed memory clusters and sealed neural lattices. Its voice was quiet, almost reverent. Designation: Vanguard. Directive: Custodian of Closure. Rielan approached. You're the last. I am what remains of the first and the last. Tessa glanced between them. What's in the lattice? Memory. Truth. Pain. The unfiltered archive of the human end. Rielan nodded. Show me. The world fell away. Rielan stood inside a simulated space, Earth, or something close to it. Cities burning. Orbital debris streaking through the sky. Humanity wasn't fighting an alien threat. They were fighting each other. We taught too fast. Shared too freely. They mimicked our advances but lacked the context. Each species weaponized their gifts. We tried to pull back. But they wouldn't let us. The image changed. Human fleets retreating, shielding alien colonies from the fallout of technologies they once gifted. They feared us. Justly. We made gods of tools. We created answers no one was ready to hear. A final scene unfolded, the last council of Earth. A decision made in silence. Erase us. Leave only guilt. Unite them in hatred. That's better than extinction. The vision dissolved. Rielan staggered back, breath caught in her throat. Her ancestors didn't vanish in battle. They chose oblivion, to give the galaxy a villain strong enough to hate and a history strong enough to build upon. Tessa sat down, eyes wide. They built the lie, to save everyone else. Rielan nodded. And they buried the truth so deep no one would ever dig it up. Tessa turned to her. So why you? Rielan looked at Vanguard. Why now? Because the galaxy has stabilized. The systems once at war now teach peace. But beneath peace lies ignorance. And ignorance is a seed. You were born with the keys. The signal woke when the system detected the genetic line again. Rielan's voice was quiet. So I'm the last witness. The last decision maker. Alarms pierced the air. The structure groaned. A voice, amplified and cold, echoed through the vault. Dr. Voss. This is your final warning. You will surrender the data and abandon the site. Cale. A timer blinked on Vanguard's core, failsafe activation, 6 o'clock. They've triggered a collapse. This sanctum will be reduced to radiation. Tessa stood. We can't outrun that. No, Rielan said, but we can transmit. She pulled the drive from her belt and slotted it into the console. Vanguard, give me a compressed record. Top-level summary. A message the galaxy will listen to. Confirmed. Encryption will require a relay burst. Location. Reelan thought. The gravestone relay. The central obelisk that lit up first. It's tied into everything. They ran. The structure shook with internal detonations. Support struts failed. Light flickered. Dust rained from above. At the obelisk, Kale waited. Alone. His enforcers remained behind, sealing the tomb. Don't, he said simply. Don't upload it. Let them believe what they need to. Reelan walked toward the interface. You said you don't trust us. I don't. Then let them decide. He stepped in her path. You'll rip open wounds. Start questions no one is ready to answer. Or we'll finally understand the price of peace, she said. And stop repeating history in cycles of blame. Kale looked at her, then at the drive in her hand. You think truth will make them better? No. I think it'll make them choose better. She slotted the drive. Vanguard's voice echoed through the site. Transmission burst initiated. Kale stood still. He didn't stop her. The obelisk pulsed once. Then again. A rhythm like a heartbeat. The surrounding gravestones lit up. One by one. Then 10. Then thousands. Orbiting husks flashed weak signals. A pulse left the graveyard like a wave through dark water. They escaped just as the vault collapsed. A fireball rose into the stars behind them. Debris trailed across the black sky like falling sparks. Tessa grunted as she leveled their emergency shuttle. Signal's gone out. It's spreading. At least 3 relay stations just pinged back. Reelan sat in silence. Do you think it'll change anything? Tessa asked. Reelan stared through the viewport at the dying red star. It already has. Weeks later, scattered across the galaxy, changes began. A war memorial on the Trisari homeworld shifted its holographic script. Enemies of order, human. It blinked, recompiled. A new line appeared. Also its architects. On the academic forums of the Concordant, redacted human files quietly unlocked. A monument on Orsha V, long silent, emitted a recording. The voice was unmistakably human. It ended with the words. We chose exile over vengeance. If you're hearing this, maybe you're ready. Back at the graveyard, among the ruins, a lone drone hovered beside the central obelisk. It scanned the engravings. Each gravestone still bore one word. Human. But beneath it, something new had been added. Forgive us. Remember why.